All right, welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the city of dark. That's right, it is dark today because it is rainy, and we are broadcasting to the world. And my guest is actually in the middle of the United States in Chicago, the Windy City. And of course, we have people in the chat room all around the globe. So without further ado, in case you haven't read my guest's bio, which you could see where you're reading the chat as right now, I'm going to introduce him, which is the one and only Mr. Winter Laake. Winter, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. How are you, Dr. J?
I'm doing great. As we were talking earlier, it's all about the fear mongering. Today, I heard 7 airlines are going bankrupt, possibly today. 10% market shut down today, or 10% drop in the stock market, and we can't even buy water. So we'll get into some of that. But let me ask you first about black magic in general. What's the difference between black magic and white magic? Or let me back it up first. Can you tell us the definition in your perspective what magic is?
Magic is manipulating reality really with your mind, manipulating reality through the cosmic forces that exist in the universe that can be honed by the Satanic Consciousness. There's really no difference between white and black magic. They all basically summon from the same source, which is innately within the person. Magic has been so defined and redefined, but, really, there's only 1% of the population that get results. My work, through Satanic philosophy has always sought to bend reality to my will, to ascertain things before they occur, and prescience and things like that. It's much more cosmic. It entails the entirety beyond our terrestrial existence, whereas a lot of Satanic practitioners and so on, they're very much worldly. Mine is a much more Luciferian outlook on reality.
Would you say your type of magic is old school black magic as opposed to modern day Anton LaVey satanic magic?
It's probably entails everything from the thousands and thousands of years since the beginning of our recorded history. I encompass magic from all aspects of all different philosophers. Anton LaVey, Lord Byron, Francis Bacon, any of the different practitioners down through time. There's just been so much. So you can take from all of that and you utilize that to your power, because that is the guiding light. Power is the guiding light for the black magician. So you want to incorporate that. You want to incorporate Aleister Crowley's work, and you want to look at all of it, the entire spectrum. You don't want to limit yourself into one little box.
I actually love Aleister Crowley. I have several of his books, and the Book of the Law, of course, is probably the mainstay that most people look at. And of course, that's what I started with, and then of course got hooked onto that. Started reading the Book of Lies and so on, so forth. 777, I believe, is one of them. Let me ask you this: Is humanity evil?
Yes, mankind is inherently evil. It is in their genetic makeup. All men are created evil. That is from their disposition. We are cordoned by the boundaries of law. If we remove the boundaries of law, man deprived is beast. So that evil comes out. There's a hierarchy to this evil. There's lawful evil, neutral, and so on, almost like a role-playing game, but in a reality sense, in a philosophical study and everything that I've looked at, man is literally on these rungs of existence. Now, there is barbaric evil, which is something that does need to be stamped out from our consciousness. This is rapine and destruction and worthless nonsense and hurting of animals and children and so on, which I'm totally against. That is barbaric evil. That plays into mankind's evolution, as well as where we are right now in a civilized evil. We are conditioned by our law, and that law lays down the parameters of our existence. But if you remove those boundaries of law, you will see mankind unleashed in its real nature, which is evil.
Right now, as we were talking just before we started streaming, I talked to you about what's going on with the coronavirus here in California, which will soon hit you, as you mentioned, where we can't even buy water, toilet paper, or there's lines around the block for urgent care, hospitals, etc. Would you say that's a form of evil, fear mongering?
Well, yes, this bioweapon that was unleashed by the Chinese in order to stop democracy from overtaking their capital city of Beijing has been running rapine throughout the world. They don't care about the ramifications. They only care about the power. So when they unleashed the virus, it dispersed crowds, which was their goal. The crowds at the time in China and Beijing were 2 million strong. They were literally on the verge of collapse. They were going to lose that. And that would have started a domino effect in China. And in the Wuhan area, there is a lab there for real that unleashed this bioweapon. Indeed, the diet of the Chinese is something to be gotten as well. You know, they eat bats and rats on a stick and so on, and no bashing of the Chinese, but their diet is not holistic. And so, of course, they can go and utilize that as some kind of excuse. But the COVID-19 virus is different. Novel. The reason why is because it is so contagious. It's an air pathogen, which means even though you're making a mask or wearing that, it's not going to stop it. It's in the very fabric of the air itself. And I don't see how a forced quarantine is going to make it go away. I think they're doing it in illegal means. I don't think people are going to be able to afford it. It is creating a panic issue. They should not do this. They should just leave everything as it is, let everything run as it is. And if people get sick, yes, but they're doing it for them, not us. They're creating a panic that does not need to be. We have a strong country. We have regular supply lines. But the Chinese implemented, and they knew that they would crash the world when they did, because their country was crashing. Donald Trump has been very much on the fore since the beginning of his presidency, attacking them, and their money and their value have been plummeting. They've been under severe, all kinds of different things that were implemented by our government. And so their country is literally crashing. I have friends in the Epoch Times, and they have constantly reported on this, and even their reporting center was attacked in China and burned down and so on. So things were getting really bad there. There's a censor blackout, so we weren't aware of it, but their country was literally on the verge and still is. And so they unleashed this bioweapon, and hence now we are all under some kind of global quarantine. The markets have crashed and so on. China had this method where we're crashing, so we're going to crash you. It's unprecedented in our lifetime, and it's going to escalate. And I hope that the virus doesn't mutate. I have a background in quantum physics and philosophy and so on. I've kind of looked at this, and I've looked at other viruses along these same lines. This one is very novel in how fast it moves. It's impressive under the microscope. It's very fast moving, more than others. And yes, it's respiratory in nature. And it does, they say, limited to the old, those that have, some kind of limited immune system. But I think that actually it could be, there's something else that they're not telling us.
Do you think that right now, 2020 is worse having the COVID-19 virus as opposed to, say, the Spanish flu because of the means of travel we have, where you could literally fly across the world and back in 36 hours?
Absolutely. I mean, that does make the spread a lot worse. And, they're thinking people are just going to not do that. And that just makes it where, in an overpopulated society as it is, I always felt that overpopulation leads to extinction anyway, because we're not sustainable in our society. we are running out of things. The supply lines are extremely fragile, and supplies come from farmers and grassroots situations which are not functioning right now. So we are looking at a tipping point, and it comes gradually, it comes subtly. But when the crash happens, it'll be intense, because when people right now are more concerned about their toilet paper and so on, really they need to be looking at getting their medicine. They need to be looking at getting some ibuprofen, some fever killers, some bullets. They need to get
bullets. That's right. I agree with that. You said bullets. I totally agree with that.
You have to. I mean, people are worried about toilet paper and they don't have guns and bullets. They're going to be, because if it goes, let's go 30 days out. They say you're under a forced quarantine. We've closed everything. Yes, okay, you can go to the store. Where are we going to get our money to pay for these things? Okay, so if we're not working and you put the population out of work, it's going to create a very, very bad situation. And it already has in a sudden crash. Let's go where we're 30 days out from this moment. I have limited supplies. I mean, I have certain areas where I think I could go to be safe if things really get bad. And if anyone in striking distance of my voice, I can share these destinations. One being the Fermi Lab here outside of Chicago, which is a hardened underground facility that has water and power. Another one being an abandoned atomic accelerator outside of Dallas. That has everything. And also, if you're near California, in Pahrump, Nevada, near the Groom Lake, which is Area 51, actually may incorporate some of it, but there is a mine there. It's called the Groom Mine. And that is a really good place to hide out. So those are just three I know of. I know of several others, but this is if things really get bad. This is if your neighbor is killing neighbor, which is inevitable. And this is if, that man deprived his beast, where you get these roving gangs, you get people that are starving, you get people that are out of water, and so on. And that is kind of an inevitability, because if we don't have the money, so we're not working, you have a gig work, your bar is shut, you're not making your money. 2 weeks from now, they say there's going to be a supplement. That could take forever. Plus, it's not going to be the same. And will that even work? And will there be supplies to buy? There may not be, because there's running right now on all of it. And it's just getting out of control, like even within 24 hours. So if we go a week, we go 2 weeks, we go 3 weeks of this, it's not good.
You mentioned 30 days out. I'm assuming you've heard the phrase 7 days to animal?
I have.
Which is exactly what you described. Once people go hungry, once they start stealing people's food, they will shoot you for a can of peaches or whatever it be.
Absolutely. They will. I mean, if we're starving, it's not going to be a good scenario. When you get people that don't have the money, or the supply lines have broken down into certain areas, you're talking about trying to feed millions of people that have suddenly been put out. They're closed. So many different factors and things within our country alone. It's already happened in Italy. There's people that have been running around, and they've been under a lockdown a little longer than us, but they're already showing that the supply lines aren't working. There's been some media blackouts on it. And so I would recommend that the government totally reverse, open everything back up, stop all this immediately, and let it run its course. If people get sick, so be it. Yes, okay, you may have some kind of overwhelmed issue with certain things, but you're talking, not you're talking, but in general, in looking at the math, in looking at the calculation, they're talking about putting millions and millions of people at risk over a virus that may kill some people. Yes. Some people will get sick. Yes, that's true. But this is an overreaching, forced quarantine that can create a greater danger.
26 years ago, this past January, I was in the epicenter of the North earthquake, which compared to some earthquakes now over 9.0, this was 6.8, but it was massive enough where things collapsed, houses blew up, trains derailed, etc. The difference was from then we had money. It wasn't so big as everything electronic. You didn't have to go to the ATM or everything paid with debit card. People actually held cash. If this happens now, we don't have anything to trade. What are you going to go to the 7-Eleven with? What are you going to have in your pocket? Your keys? Statues around? There really isn't anything for trade these days.
No, there's not. It's not like that. I mean, look at Katrina. It was 2 weeks into Katrina. There was zero power, zero grid, rapes, destruction, home invasions, all this kind of stuff that was buried and not talked about. It went insane. And that was over a weather event in a small area. Now they're going to crash the country. They're going to say you have to stay at home. There are no more bars or places to go. There's no restaurants. There's no functional societal meetings. I mean, this is not good. And they've wrecked it, being a man disaster. I think they need to reverse course very quickly. I mean, it can be really rough and tough.
What do you see as a positive outlook on this, or a positive solution where it would minimize the contamination of millions, if not billions of people? Because we now have, 7.8 billion across this earth?
I know, it's way overpopulated. I mean, it will be a depopulator. I mean, I don't know by how much. I mean, the world could blink and a billion people could die, and it still wouldn't affect the course of things. That's a demographer's view. That's not some kind of psychotic, meandering, wanting the death of the world. I do not. I like to have things, clean clothes and clean water and everything else that everyone else likes. But from a demographer's standpoint, a demographer is a person that measures population in a calculated way to what the earth can support. They've said that a billion people could vanish and it wouldn't blink. It wouldn't matter. So that's why this quarantine thing is kind of ridiculous. I mean, if it goes there, if it even kills the 77 million people, it's not going to be that rough on it, because we already lose much more to other things. Cancer is insidious, the flu is insidious, and all the other ones. I mean, we still have all the other stuff, the SARS, the bird flu, the West Nile virus, Ebola.
Let's not forget about lightning strikes. I believe the figure was, 58 or something, maybe more. But there is a better chance that you're going to get hit by lightning than there is that you're going to get hit with the coronavirus and die.
I know, and die. And that's why this crazy quarantine, it's like, what aren't they telling us? There must be something else. I do believe in all my looking and research that this is a bioweapon. I know the motives behind why it was done, because it just came out of nowhere in a very novel way at a very critical time. Unless there's something else to it. They say it dies in the heat. I think it would actually come alive in the heat. They say, the summertime it's going to die. I've never seen... I've seen things take off. I don't know. I have wrong thinking. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, actually, I believe you. I've heard that same thing too, but heat in general, warmth, is what causes growth. Look at bears, for instance. What do they do in the cold? They go and hibernate. Things like viruses and I think bacteria, and then would not grow or repopulate the way they would in warm climate.
Exactly. It's just a totally explosion of what happens in life. I mean, so this talk about, when the summer comes, it's going to die. And why do we have to be under quarantine right now? I mean, a severe quarantine, a forced quarantine. I mean, what if you don't have the money to buy stuff? What, you're going to sit at home? If you even can keep a home, who's to say that all these people are going to go along with that? So this is very uncharted, and I don't know. I mean, it's very, I would say, methodical. I think there's probably some kind of evil plan behind it, as I stated with the Chinese goals, because their country was crashing. I think they crashed the world. They definitely crashed the democracy from taking foot in Beijing, at least for a moment. I think when this thing, if it goes 30 days, the country could roar back to life and everything will return to normal, and you will see China go into a democratic state. Or it could be very, very bad where we're at basically, sticks and stones battling in the streets and things.
With the point that you said that this could be a bioweapon, I actually, when this first broke out, I asked a friend of mine who happens to be a doctor and a pharmacist, so he's schooled in both fields, and he's a practicing doctor. And the first thing he said was, this is a virus, or patented virus that was created at Fort Detrick. And I wasn't that shocked because you're saying it too, and I've heard this multiple times, but this came from an actual practicing physician who's actually a pharmacist as well. Another point too I want to mention is 1999 we had that big scare coming into 2000, and then we also had this scare 8 years ago coming into 2012, the end of the world. Now we have 2020. Do you think this is sort of made to be this year as opposed to say 2019 or 2023?
I don't know. It's just, the randomness of society and how it moves, the methodical nature of those in power. I mean, they have so much power and so much money. They can move mountains, and it's the majority does not. And it's a free for all. It's an Illuminati. It's anything goes. I've seen so many things happen over the past few years that have been head scratchers, like the whole ISIS, experiment where they went out and they just started killing everything and enslaving everything, and the wars that keep going on and on. I mean, what is the reason behind it all? And I'm a satanic practitioner, and I look at things in the satanic light. But when there's actually like this, it's on the rung of what I would call chaotic evil. Okay, when I speak of barbaric evil, that is that low stabbing someone on a plank and taking their wallet, whatever. Then just above it is chaotic evil, which is where you have governments in power that just unleash their evil upon the populace out of no love whatsoever, out of the only ramification to keep their power, and that is it. And then you can get higher and elevated, where I feel that man is more lawful evil and so on, where they're more masters of themselves, they get more cosmic, you're in tune with aliens and so on. But these people are right now in a chaotic evil state, and they're unleashing chaos into the society. I did not think, I always kept it in the back of my mind, and I'd always hoped that these types wouldn't do this kind of thing, but to derail a global economy, to do this on such a vast level where it affects every person on the planet. Because you go into a store and it's totally pillaged. What if those supply lines, as I said, the fragile as they are, don't get it back? It's going to get really bad.
I blame the media for 99% of it, especially when I look at the mainstream left networks like CNN or ABC. They've been pounding this. I mean, breaking news every hour, even every 15 minutes, and they're talking about Spain, and they're talking about Africa, they're talking about China, Australia. But how does that affect me in Los Angeles? You're like you said, it's such a small chance. And you also mentioned the forced quarantine. There was this woman who didn't want to, or was not allowed to come back to the United States, or she either was an Italian citizen or she was visiting Italy. So what did she do? She went to Mexico and drove in through Mexico, and that's how she supposedly infected people. I'm sure you might have heard of that case because it's been circulating in the news.
I have not heard it, but I heard of some people that just walked through Canada. I mean, there were some people that were barred. They flew into Canada and were able to run over. So it's endless. I'm sure that's happening everywhere, because if they kept you and I out and we had a home or a place in where we were, we're going to make it there. You know what I mean? It's going to be like an obsession. Yeah, we're going to make it there. So they're not going to keep people out that really want to get there, you know, and it's not good. Their forced quarantine on this level, to me, speaks of a chaotic evil, something they're not telling us about this virus. They garden variety it. They say, yes, it affects respiratory. Yes, it affects the elderly. Everything affects the elderly.
That's right. Okay? Yeah, it does.
Doesn't matter. But, you know, there are babies dying in New York. Now, what does that mean? Okay, and there are things happening that people have died of COVID-19 that don't fit into the scenario. What does that mean? You know, and why is it that it's hitting so many odd, like, I hate to say it, but supposed politicians, like there's been politicians and theater and actor people getting it. So that's just weird. They don't really have a lot of contact with people anyway. You know, like the leader of Brazil got it and he was near Trump or whatever. I mean, that's just weird. And like Trudeau's wife gets it. Why? She doesn't have any contact with anybody. So whatever they're telling us, the situation of the quarantine doesn't make sense because these people are higher elevated. They're not touched. So what's really going on here? It's control of the populace for what? Now, I hope it's not alien either. I mean, if there is an alien influence going on, you know, that is a possibility as well, because this is a weapon that the alien or an entity that is exterior from our terrestrial existence would utilize to exterminate a good amount of the population before they would arrive or something. That is an odd thing to think about, and I know it's like outlandish in a way to think about, but it could be a possibility. There has actually been scientists that have thought about end times, how an alien would come into our sphere and what kind of things they would, you know, unleash upon the populace in order to get it to where it would be controlled. And one of them was, you know, through the use of an advanced bioweapon.
You know, I'm really glad you brought that up because let's just say ETs want to take over Earth. They don't want to destroy our infrastructure. They don't want to drop nukes or conventional weapons. What better way to exterminate us than releasing a bioweapon like a virus or some bacteria that they're immune to, but we're not?
Right. And they may not be immune to something here either. So it goes back and forth. But, you know, if they do, if there is an alien out there that's going to come here, they are far surpassed us. And the only reason why they would want to come here is either one of two things: to harvest humanity, which is an interesting species, or to just live on this planet, to exist on this place. This place isn't that unique in the universe. There's probably, you know, a billion other like Earths out there in the universe, in the quintillions of different stars and things that exist in the infinity. But this is an interesting place, and it's still young enough. We're at a type 1 civilization where we are vulnerable to these type of things. And, you know, they could, in an alien, you know, let's step away from ourselves and look at it. If the alien did do that, they unleash that on the populace, it softens it up, and then they can easily just come in. It's fascinating, really, to think about.
Some people have asked me over the weekend if the coronavirus is a cover for something major, such as the finding of ETs. Maybe we locate them on, I don't know, I don't want to say the moon or one of the Goldilocks planets or something like that. Do you think that looking at it from a different perspective than what the mainstream media is telling you, that this is just literally a cover for something bigger to come?
It could very possibly be. There's been things and events that have indicated it to me. I mean, never before in our lifetime has there ever been a global quarantine of this people where, in Switzerland in about 4 hours from now, I have a friend there, is going under total quarantine as well, where there won't be anything open. I mean, where, you're in Switzerland. Why? I mean, they are like way up on the totem pole with, society and their services and everything. They haven't really had any COVID-19 cases appear. So the grand question is, are we being prepared for something? I mean, we're being prepared supposedly for our own, quote, safety, to stay indoors and stay away from people, no more crowds of 10. You go in the store, there's no water. I mean, what the heck? That is insane. And yeah, we're very much being prepped for something. I think it will reveal itself over the next 30 days, if not within 2 weeks. I would like to see this thing end tomorrow. I would like to see all of this nonsense stop. If we stopped it tomorrow, I think we would be okay. But the forced quarantine and the things that are far greater than the virus, which are at hand, where people are running out of money, they become desperate, they become angry, they fight with themselves, they're gonna kill. I mean, it's inevitable.
I'm glad you brought that up, because not the virus, but the fear of COVID-19 itself is definitely causing people to act very, very irrational, super irrational at that.
Exactly. And it's going to be an inevitability where we just have so many people rushing in, and they're not supplied, and that's where you're going to get that grand upheaval. It's like a bad powder keg, and the weapons are only going to escalate. I mean, mankind ever wants to perfect the better weapon, and that plays into it as well. When it wants to be totally armed and and have explosives, and it feels deprived, and you're going to end up getting like this Mad Max scenario. I mean, I'm curious. I mean, I look out my window right now. There is no one out there, and I live in this ancient neighborhood. It's like a 100-year-old house on a hill, and there used to be thriving things going on. I mean, now it's just zero population, and I took a drive around, and there's no one in the highways, and it's like really a panic-stricken situation, and fear is a powerful weapon. And why they want to keep everyone isolated and indoors, they say it's for your safety. They say it's because of COVID-19. I don't believe it. I think this is nonsense. I think it needs to stop. Unless there's something they're not telling us, and I'm probably 90% sure they're not telling us everything.
You mentioned earlier, we both talked about aliens, extraterrestrials. What's the satanic perspective on them? Because Michael Aquino and the Temple of Set don't believe in ETs, ghosts, or anything like that.
Well, they need to change their thinking. I'm a scientist, and I remember even 5 years ago, I would go to conferences, and I would stand up there and I say, ETs are real. Look at the math, and they would laugh at me. Now, all of the scientists that were laughing at me, they all agree with me. They looked at the math. They looked at the calculation. They looked at everything, and they said, you're right, or whoever was right. It doesn't matter. But, I mean, they are. ETs exist. Just look at the mathematics, and you'll see. What I mean is the calculation aversion, meaning the Fermi paradox being that we are alone in the universe as opposed to being a collective. The Fermi paradox does not play out. The Fermi paradox means we are alone in the universe. There is nothing else. That in itself is terrifying. But in looking at the math, it defies it, where you have an infinite amount of space infinite amount of possibilities. So you have all of these different variables, Goldilocks planets, as you said, and so on, and stars and other things in existence that are beyond us. Now, I'm a remote viewer, and I've remote viewed other parts of our galaxy. Most of what is out there is very evil. I have not seen a risen, altruistic alien. Most of what is out there is very much kept to themselves, ultra powerful, super brainiac beings. Some come through consciousness. Most do, because there's just such a vast amount of space. They're communicating through their minds and so on. And if you reach out, you can contact them through a certain amount of training. But neither here nor there. Most of what my experience is they are as well as what I would deem as satanic. That they are entities that are very much self-driven conquerors. They're not good creatures. They're very much into experiments and exploring like we are. But we don't have the capacity. We're still very much in a type 1 situation where we're very terrestrial. We are sort of imprisoned on this planet. We're not allowed to really explore outside of certain things. You know, there was a guy in the 70s who they called him the nuclear Boy Scout, and he was trying to build a ship in his garage and so on, and the government came down on him and so on. I mean, you're not allowed to really try to do things that is sort of outside of the box. Why that is, I don't know. Maybe we are, or not we, but maybe our governments are under some kind of alien overlord. I don't know. But I do know that aliens exist, and I know that, you know, a lot of aliens that I have foreseen in the universe are not so nice.
I've talked to a few remote viewers on this show and without broadcasting as well. And aside from being able to remote view distances that are unlimited, I've heard they've been able to remote view different times. Have you been able to do the same thing?
Right. Time is very invariant for our terrestrial space. Yes, time in the universe and time here. Time doesn't really exist in the universe per se. But yes, you can look into the future and look into the past, and you can look into alternate futures and alternate pasts, because we're in a bubble universe, meaning that everything that is happening right now simultaneously is happening in a different perspective in a different place. It's quantum entanglement. It's vast. Yes. And I've looked into the future. I can tell you I saw 2020 more as a time of our transcendence, meaning we are going to transcend into our machines. That's what I was writing about most in 2009 when I was remote viewing into the 2020s and remote viewing into the 2050s. I did not see this virus coming, although I have written a lot about, you know, in screenplays and so on, odd things, you know, with viruses, and I think a lot of movie people have. But see, therein lies the choice of humanity. At any moment, you know, a person could decide to just pick up a brick and throw it through the window. And therein lies, you know, really interesting dynamics to things. So yes, if you are a remote viewer that is worth his salt, it really is, you know, in the old term of medieval times being clairvoyant, you can look into the future. You can look into the past. You can see things transpire. But I also think things that are leaned on, like, for example, when I was remote viewing back in 2009 and I saw some of what would happen in 2020, it was with my own slant. I had a direction that I wanted to look at, and I was seeing the progression of Kurzweil and some other scientists and what they were working on in the augmented machines, which have since transpired. And there will further along, you know, downloading your brain into a nanocellular organism and so on, and living in an infinite space within a cybernetic, you know, mind in a sense. But that's where I was looking. But yes, you can definitely perceive the future. I've seen some futures now. I was remote viewing actually 2 days ago, and I was seeing some things going down, and the alternate, just as I said, trying to look short term within this 30, 60-day window of what this ramification will affect. And as I said, it's going to go two ways, where it just totally peters out and people go back to normal, or it gets into a chaotic situation.
Turns to animal, and that's obviously the negative outcome. There's a question for you. This isn't exactly about what you're speaking about, which I'm going to come back to, the implementation of machines. This is from Lasha Senyak. It reads, what does Winter think the purpose of good is?
Very good. Good is fascinating, and in a great sense of things, I would love good to exist for everyone. I think if an altruistic existence could be possible, that'd be great. We are right now in a forced civilized evil, meaning that we need the bounds of law in order to constrain us, and thus good exists within those bounds. The purpose of good, in a great sense, where we have finally possibly ridden our own nature and gotten to a space where we could be into some high consciousness and not willing to be a part of our animal, not willing to be a part of our satanic natures and so on, which I don't see ever possible. But yeah, that's what they would say with the purpose of good would be to rise. It's just not possible within this satanic species. Good only exists within the bounds of law. Pacifism only exists within the bounds of law. If you don't have that, and what I mean by the bounds of law is the police. We need to have someone come and keep us in line. And the grand crux of my satanic philosophical study is, why is that? Why do we need a cop on the corner? Because we are just animal crazy. We are insane beasts. We're not good things. We're not good creatures. We love to take, and we love to just be evil and unleash our nature, and that nature being evil. And good is a dynamic that only exists within these bounds. And we could say that, well, we live in a good utopian existence now. True. But if you remove all the high weaponry behind it that enforces it, it won't be around. And I would love to have an argument or a philosophical discussion against someone who says, okay, I'm inherently good, and then I would say I'm inherently evil, and I would have this discussion with this person, and I want to see what they would say. So, maybe that's something more to explore, because that's, as I said, the grand crux of my whole study in satanic philosophy is what is this good-evil dynamic that makes us dwell. And I'm not talking about, ideologies or religions or Bibles or anything. I'm talking from base human standard of thousands and thousands of years ago, with all the bloodshed that has happened over the earth, with all the armies that have come and gone, with all of the tears that have been shed, all the death, all the skeletons, all the war, and just the carnage throughout our time on earth, and to explore all that and to find out why that is, and its inherent nature is just fascinating.
There's two questions. I'm going to ask them in reverse order because the second question is linked to what you just said. It's from the same person, Lasha. It reads, if people are intrinsically evil, why can't they be intrinsically good?
I would like to find that out. I think it's just because it's not possible. There's been communes and things explored within, as I said, all this bloodshed has happened right here on planet Earth. All the